Hello, 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 hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to In Review. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the late one. And today is the 27th of May, 2021. Thank you so much for joining. And one thing I'll say to you is to like and subscribe, share the shows, be interactive. Those on Instagram, those on Facebook, and those on YouTube. I want to thank you so much for this evening. Of course, today I took a trip on the road there to pick up something, and I tell you, traffic was busy, pubs, restaurants open, and somehow it felt like this sense of normality. And I felt, wow, we're getting back to some level of normality. People on their mask, and I must say, there's a level of discipline which is in the air, and a sense of actually moving forward. But at the same time, you're hearing things in the news talking about, did the Prime Minister do this right? Dominic Cummings. And so that is something we're going to touch on later. They talk about 1,100 young people caught, arrested, or people arrested with counter lines. They've been talking about some children being missing by, and maybe the perpetrators are Eastern European, but with counter lines, we're seeing something else. Sasha Johnson from the Take the Initiative Party, she was shot, and very unfortunate. But at the same time, the police have got to come in and to sort out the situation. And apparently, 5 persons were arrested, and these persons we believe are the perpetrators. And we're going to talk on that as well, and maybe some more update on COVID as well. But without further ado, what I'll do is to invite my resident, Mr. Truth, Anthony. How are you, sir?
Hey, good evening to you and to your listeners as well. No, very good week actually, yes, as well, Selborne. And you're right. Just listening to your intro there, people are getting back to some sense of, I suppose, what we would all call the new normal.
Yes. I did felt that because and tomorrow there's a staff who is going away, a fellow colleague who's going away, and the staff is meeting up for the first time as well, and everybody anticipation, looking forward to it. Of course, this is in Kent, it's a positive atmosphere, and we are looking forward to that. And I believe we're onto something positive. Well, how's your week otherwise, Anthony?
Yeah, it hasn't been too bad actually. I think, as you know, I look after my elderly father as well, so yes, some challenges there. But apart from that, I've been doing a few voiceovers, been doing some social media stuff, so trying to make use of the time, because as we all know, time is valuable. Once we've used it, we don't get it back.
Well, the whole concept of think it, plan it, do it now is the essence of don't wait around, just do it. If you need a voiceover, you just do it. I'm one of the product of think it, plan it, do it now, because I've done some little intro for my shows now, and I just do it myself. I'm the voiceover.
Well, I think you are the embodiment of the whole premise of what think it, plan it, do it now is all about. It is what it says on the tin. It's think, plan, do now, and not procrastinate, not do later. So I think sometimes we overcomplicate things by thinking, that we can't do certain things because we haven't got this or we haven't got that. And actually, when we put our minds to it and we start actually progressing towards something, we realize very quickly that we actually can achieve it.
And ladies and gentlemen, Siobhan, I believe I'll be able to make it, and David is doing some program on diabetes. He may come in later, but Anthony and I will have in this conversation. But Anthony, while we are here still, and just two of us, I want to go back onto that point about think it, plan it, do it now, because I've been doing this walking, and I've disclosed it to people as well that I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, and the doctor. I did a massive set of blood tests recently, and it came back, and the doctor called me. I was supposed to be called tomorrow. They called me yesterday, and they said, "Mr. Siddle, what are you doing? Because your level of the diabetic thing was 52 and it's gone to 42. So you are now like out of it, but we want to keep you in the zone so you don't get comfortable." You know what I'm saying? And the cholesterol is great, the sugar is great, and the liver is great, and the blood pressure, they said they're monitoring it. And they said, whatever you're doing it, to keep doing it. And one of the quotes which I created while I walk and talk is that once you tap into something that is working, go boost mode. I mean to say, just keep at it, and just, so now, in a way, I had to buy the domain, Walk and Talk Motivational Moments, Anthony. I had to buy it.
Oh, excellent. Well, listen, it was something that initially you started off as a I suppose a little bit of a private thing you were doing just as a bit of fun when all this
Yeah,
thing started. You gave it a name. The name's become a brand.
yeah,
You've been actually consistent by doing it, and so by being consistent, other people have now seen that and have obviously got used to it. You've now got used to it. It's helped you physically, as you've seen with your diabetes
yeah.
activities there going down. So again, I think it just shows that when you're committed to something
Mm,
wholeheartedly and you go in and you go all in, then you'll see results.
exactly, totally. And definitely today we want to find some results as to what is happening now with Dominic Cummings and the Prime Minister.
Well, that's an absolute killer. I mean, if ever there was somebody who was seeking revenge, we all saw it and witnessed it yesterday. I mean, that was, I suppose you would have to say that will go down in history as the ultimate revenge speech given by somebody after they've left Downing Street. I don't think, and I'm pretty sure that
Mm,
nobody in government has ever been so critical of their leader and ministers after leaving. And in his case, he was second in terms of his authority behind Boris Johnson
yes.
to what he has actually come out and said. Absolutely unbelievable stuff.
And ladies and gentlemen, if for those who are watching, I mean, from overseas, Dominic Cummings was the right hand man. He was like the Alistair. What was Tony Blair? Right? Alistair Campbell. He's the right hand guy for the Prime Minister. There are many people have said he was the one behind the power. He's the one who was the architect for Brexit, and many people didn't like this guy. Even at one point, Dominic Cummings said because he broke the sort of rules for engagement in the sense of COVID and what we should do with social distance. And what he said is he had to drive to test his eyes, and nobody believed him. But now, all of a sudden, Anthony, why are people believing him?
Well, I think this is the double standards. If you politics and you come out and you say something which is untrue, and then now you then come out with allegations, which a lot of people might deem as being sour grapes, then you have a bit of a credibility issue because people are going to be saying, well, hang on a minute. When we did see you last in the Rose Garden talking about this particular incident, you gave this long, lengthy explanation about how you did not do the said thing. And
Yes.
now we're finding out that actually, in fact, things were different. And now you want us to believe you now that you're saying things are different with Boris Johnson. So I think in his case, despite him being the right-hand man to Boris, I do believe there's a bit of a credibility issue, albeit I think some of the allegations have been quite serious and will need to be, I suppose, will need to be found out when they do the actual full investigation, either later on this year or early next year.
Welcome, Michelle Clark. Thank you for joining. What would we say would you highlight as some of the key salient moment Dominic sort of highlighted?
Well, I think for most people who watched that 7 hours, I didn't watch the whole 7 hours. I've got to be honest. I only watched the bit that I saw in the news, so I can't go into detail. But I think the key things for me and for the rest of the public is the fact that many thousands of lives could have been saved. I mean, that I think is the real takeaway, because that we have had over 120,000 people who have lost their life, and if even one of those lives could have been saved
Yes.
by actions that the health secretary had taken, then that's a life worth saving. And I think that really is at his door now, and I think he will have to actually answer and give specific answers, not just saying about we were trying to put in place arrangements. He'll have to be specific in terms of what exactly did he do to try and minimize the risk of people dying, and also the fact that he did say he was going to put a ring around care homes. And clearly he didn't, because people left hospitals with COVID and went back to care homes. So I think they're the two main ones that I think the public will really want to dig a bit more into, and to find out if he actually did do what he said he did.
Yeah, because as you rightly said, as he said in his own words, we were told categorically in March that people would be tested before they went back to care homes. We only subsequently found out that that hadn't happened. And he said, I started getting calls, and number 10 were getting calls saying Hancock is interfering with the building of the test and trace system. because he's telling everybody what to do to maximize his chance of hitting his stupid target by the end of the month. Is this, as you rightly said, as you sort of alluded, is this a level of sour grapes at the same time? I mean, the government can try its best, because this is like, I mean, we've discussed it a lot, and we talk about the logistics, we talk about the managing of the COVID, but at the same time, it was new waters, new territory at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, listen, I mean, I think the thing which is really critical here was that when the pandemic started, we were told by the government that we have a plan. And clearly there was no plan, because, Dominic Cummings has now come out and said there was no plan. We saw the fiasco with the PPE. We saw the fiasco with people who had COVID going back to care homes, and all the other bits and pieces. Track and trace didn't work, so there was no plan. So for me personally, I think that the health secretary does have a lot to answer to, as does Boris Johnson. But at the same time, going forward now to where we are, we shouldn't underestimate the impact that the vaccine and the organisational setup to actually administer that to the millions who have now had it in the UK, myself included, and the benefits to those to minimise any more deaths and suffering. So on the one hand, I say yes, let's have an inquiry and find out what's gone on. On the other hand, I say, well, we have to give some credit where credit's due for the efforts that we've made in order to be where we are right now.
And what Matt Hancock keeps talking about is, and Prime Minister say, hey, we're going to do an inquiry very soon. Let's deal with that at that time. But at the same time, we've got 75% of new cases, which they're saying is of the Indian variant. And if that's the case now, one has got to actually take into consideration some of the best practices. And one might not know about these best practices until they are scrutinized by an inquiry, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, let's just hope that the Indian variant, as I think has been mentioned, is actually being able to be controlled by the vaccines that we currently have. And then let's leave the inquiry to the inquiry when it comes. Clearly, it's not going to come now. It will be later on down the road. And I suppose for Boris Johnson's point of view, he's hoping that will enable a lot of media attention around him and what's gone on by Dominic Cummings to have died down a bit. And he might be able to get some, in order to escape a lot of the criticism by kicking it down the road for a bit. But, it will happen. It has to happen. 127,000 people have lost their lives. So there has to be a full independent inquiry to get to the bottom of, were there any mistakes? Could things have been done better? And if there were mistakes, who's accountable for them?
Can you hear me? I just want to make sure. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can. I can't hear you now, though.
Now. You can hear me now? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Before we move on from the next topic, but what is the case now of advisors, persons working with you? Because, hey, Anthony, when you think about it, if you work very closely with someone, you're able to say some things in jest and just feel relaxed. Is it now that persons are going to be very careful now of the advisors that they have around it? This guy was right there. I mean, I'm sure things have been said in jest. People lose it.
Well, I think if you're a senior person, a politician or executive in a company, normally what you do is you sign a non-disclosure, and this non-disclosure forbids you from actually saying anything outside of your employ once you leave the organisation. And then if I'm not mistaken, if you were to breach that, you could be legally held liable for it. So I think maybe in Dominic Cummings' case, there was no non-disclosure agreement signed in terms of what he could or could not say once he left Parliament or the government, and maybe that is something that I'm pretty sure if that's the case, the Boris Johnson will be looking to plug very quickly.
No, that's very interesting. Very interesting. I was thinking about that very much, but anyway. This will continue, and this whole inquiry will continue, and we'll see how it goes from there. But another topic which I wanted to touch on is, let's call it, it is Sasha Johnson. Now, Sasha Johnson is an activist with the Black Lives Matters, and she's one of the co-founders, I believe, of Take the Initiative Party. She was recently at a party in Peckham, and apparently there was a rival gang, and somehow she was, as they said, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's also talks about the fact that she was having death threats. And as a result of the death threats, the party and supporters are saying that should be taken into consideration. One of her close friend or close compatriots said they're of the view that this was really gangs. And now they've got 5 persons which they have arrested, 5 black persons that got it to be. But the irony about the whole thing is, and of course, we wish Sasha all the best. But it brings this question on the Black Lives Matter movement and the whole defunding of the police, because what we have seen now is it is that the police are at work trying to ensure to protect this lady. Anthony, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I must be honest. Whenever I hear the Black Lives Matter mantra around defunding the police, I'm not quite sure what exactly their overall objective is, because, as you say, I mean, in this particular case now, it is the police who are doing the investigation to actually find out the perpetrators of this crime. So, for me, you can't. On one hand, you're saying defund the police, but then what do you put in place? Because you have to have law and order.
Yes.
You can't have a system where you just have anarchy and people just running around doing what they like. So clearly, I would like to know a bit more around exactly what Black Lives Matter mean when they say defund the police, in terms of, well, if you defund the police, what is the alternative? What do they expect will happen once they defund the police? Are they looking for a new police force to be put in their place? Are they looking for a community police force? Are they looking for what is the actual option that they hope to achieve by defunding? And a lot of the times recently with Black Lives Matter, they've made statements, but they haven't actually provided any real meat to actually justify and explain what they mean. So I think this has been one of the criticisms, I think, of Black Lives Matter, that they've made these sorts of quite radical suggestions, but they haven't then backed it up with providing any detail around, well, what should we put in place once that particular area that they have, they say isn't working has been dismantled? What is the replacement for it?
Well, the interesting thing that comes out of this now is around community. The interesting thing that comes out of this now is how the community work together. And we've got to look at Black Lives Matters, and the principle about Black Lives Matters is good. We all know that, but it is there's a thing in law, the intention. What was the mischief rule? What was it they're created to be? But we can take it from an objective perspective that Black Lives Matters, or someone will say, well, all life matters. And we all understand that position. But the community, Anthony, and this is something you always talk about, gang violence, black and black violence, that is something which is not in the periphery or the structure in the sense of Black Lives Matter. You're not seeing that. Someone was talking about Chicago the other day. Listen, Chicago is having some serious stuff where children are just being killed, caught up in cars. They're trying to get the drug daddy or whatever. Children are just being killed within the black community. And I was saying to myself the other day, when I saw this white guy who apparently was alleged racist against a black boy, and the black community went out there, went in front of his house and said, come out now. And I'm saying, when I listen to a lot of the activists, the black activists at times, they always say, we know our going. We know what's going on the street. We need the money to go and deal with it. And I'm saying, if you know where we're going, we should be standing in front of these juggies houses and say, stop it, man. We know you are.
Yeah, it's the irony isn't lost on me, Selborne. I mean, I think I heard somebody say, do Black Lives Matter only matter when it involves a white person who has perpetrated the crime? Because let's face it, I mean, black on black killing in the UK in particular has been going on now for many, many, many years. In fact, we have the police force has a separate organization, or a separate unit, should I say, called Trident.
Trident, yes.
And that unit has specifically been set up purposely to actually deal with black on black crime. So, if it's not as if, black lives, have black lives only mattered, recently, or what about what's gone on before with all these black on black killings? We never saw protests by communities coming out to address those particular killings. Yes, we've seen people come out and ask for help when a loved one has been taken away, but in terms of just the overall situation there, clearly, a lot needs to be done. And I think if people say they know something, they need to come forward as appropriate to help the police, whether or not it's a black life that's been lost or somebody else's life has been lost, because the community either lives or dies by the people who are in it.
Yes, no, that is so correct, and we wish Sasha Johnson all the best. There's a GoFundMe which is up there now, and people are actually saying, why is there a GoFundMe? Shouldn't Black Lives Matters, who collected all the money, should be there supporting the cause for that? But that is something that you and we don't want to get into that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I would say just on closing on this particular topic, and you're right. Black Lives Matter has raised over 90 million, and there has been some criticism around where has the money gone and what actual activities do they fund that supports black people and black initiatives. So, again, for transparency, Black Lives Matter needs to really communicate and let people know what they're doing for which communities, and if indeed in Sasha's case, she's been one of their activists and she needs some support. It wouldn't be out of the realms of them to actually come forward and actually provide the financial support that she needs right now when she needs it.
Yes, most definitely, and wish all the best. But just for closing on that particular one, 5 people have been arrested after the, and what they're saying is 5 males aged between 17 and 28 have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, as well as other offenses. Searches are also being carried out at 2 addresses in Peckham. Miss Johnson was left in a life-threatening condition following the shooting at a property in Consort Road at about 3 o'clock BST. Of course, the other issues which will come up is that if it is gang violence and you're in a party, political party, association with gang, there's all different implications to that. But, we wish you all the best. But Anthony, this takes us into another zone, which packs on from there, which is county lines. And it's come back to something which is your pet peeves about the community again. The black community again, as to how are we taking care of our children. County lines, over 1,000 people arrested. County line is, right now there have been lots of talks, and you may have seen it as well, whereby, and I think we may have touched on it briefly, where there are accusations of kidnapping is going on and abduction of black children. But for years, County line has been on the forefront as one of those areas where boys disappear, children disappear, and they come back in 3 weeks' time or 2 weeks' time, and is always saying that there were drug couriers.
It's a very difficult one, and to be honest, someone, there is no simple answer here. I mean, this is a very sensitive and delicate subject, and I think it would be wrong of us to try and not do it justice by really explaining, if we had enough time, all the ins and outs around it. But clearly, those individuals, those children who get caught up in it for whatever reason, some of them are from situations where they've been picked up and they've actually been targeted outside schools. People have taken advantage of them by perhaps in encouraging them to, here's some money, here's a phone, here's some trainers, and then the individuals build trust with the youngster, and then once the youngster has actually then got the items, they then feel beholden to them, and then the older person then says, look, you've got to do this for me. So there's a lot of things that are involved in play here, and it's a really delicate subject, and one that I think, sadly, it's not easy to really pinpoint, where the issues and the solutions are for this one.
But can't we say comfortably that there is an issue in regards to what is it that make a young boy or a young girl or so want to associate with gang, where they are feeling welcome, feeling at home, feeling that they're protected? Is
Yeah,
there anything?
yeah, but this all comes back again to, and it is a pet discussion for me around the home situation, whether or not there are, the right support measures in place for the individual themselves, in terms of getting that sort of support. And also, at the end of the day, you have to also respect that some people's situation and circumstances are more difficult than others, and
Yes.
maybe they're not home in the evening or in the afternoon when their children come home, and the child themselves gets bored. There's peer pressure, and they find themselves in a situation that then spirals out of control. So I think there are lots of socioeconomic factors involved in this one, and I don't think there's a sort of one size fits all as to how the children get themselves into this. But yes, of course, in terms of the community, the parents, the wider family circle who could perhaps wrap their arms around some of these individuals to provide support, that is something that ought to needs to be taken into consideration. And also, in terms of the what can the government and the councils do in terms of providing out of school activities that keep the child from actually wandering on the streets willy-nilly after they've left school, if they're not able to go back home to where somebody's there to provide some sort of guidance and support for them. So there's loads of different things at play here, Selborne.
Yes.
And I think it's a challenging one, and it'd be interested to hear Dr. Burton's take on this as well.
Yes. Well, welcome, Dr. Burton. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. I'm talking. I've been talking since 7:30. I can keep talking.
Yeah.
But I'm well. Thank you very much for asking.
Because you had an event you're just coming from.
We did, yeah. So we imposed on this evening's discussions with yourself. So we talked about diabetes,
Yes.
and it was a fantastically fueled event in regards to exploring management of diabetes, how you first of all diagnosis of diabetes, how challenging that diagnosis is, but also the management of it. And you know what? We talked very very little about medications. It was basically a health and well-being
Lifestyle
discussion about lifestyle management. And
that should have been the answer, isn't it?
Simple. Yeah, it should have been a simple discussion about lifestyle management. And I think it's crucial that we make that point clear. Medication is the band-aid, but your lifestyle management is the lifestyle management. It will help you for life. So, but that's what we talked about this evening. But I guess you guys have been talking about the thousands of people who've been arrested.
Yeah, we're just on the
weeks.
Yeah.
And I was literally going to pick up on the point that Anthony just made there, which was, for me, I think a lot of this boils down to and whilst this isn't the solution to it all, it boils down to the cuts, unfortunately, that have been made to supporting youth during after school in terms of projects. I mean, I know I don't want to sound like an elder statesman here, but growing up, I felt that the youth clubs that I attended were very helpful and integral to being in a safe environment, but being with peers and being able to do the things that you do as kids in a very healthy state and in a very positive manner. We did things from playing computer games to home tech to designing things. It was just a really good support structure for kids. We ran from 6:30 to 9:30
Yes.
during those hours where you feel that kids would be awake and doing other things. Then you go home after bed, school the next day. So I think those kind of support groups and those structures for me just don't exist in the same manner. Yes, we have after school groups for, say, karate or playing football, but you don't do that for 3 hours on an end. It's generally an hour here and there, and then you're back home. And if you're not back home, you're doing things on the street. And I think for me, it's the cuts that have been made into that integral part of how you serve a society. And there's only so much money that will be pumped in to a council. That council's got to make head or tail for other things as well. And I think, unfortunately, what we found is that that money's not going to the people that generally would really benefit from it, and that's young kids in and around in our communities.
Yeah, and just to sort of set it in context, Police nationwide conducted a week of action from 17th of May, making 1,100 arrests, seizing 33 guns, 219 knives, identifying 80 drug dealing phone lines. There are around 600 county gangs operating in the UK, down from around 2,000 2 years ago, something Deputy Assistant Commissioner Graham McKelty attributed to an increased police response. And they're talking about this intensification of the whole thing. David, as I was saying to Anthony earlier, that there's been lots of talk of young people being missing. And one is wondering if this is a part of the equation. But as Anthony said, it's very intricate and this is a very diverse area.
It's complex. It's complex. Yes. And I'm not going to sit here and say if we had youth groups and support groups, yes, everything would be right as rain. But I do think it's a big part of that picture. And I do think it's something that it's a shame that I feel has been lost. Yes. Because I'm going to say tongue in cheek. My gang was my group of friends within, that youth group, and we got on great. We had fun, but there was no malice. There's no malintention. There's nothing misguided. We just were supported by senior members of the community and did things within that very safe bubble. And I'm happy to share that as a positive experience. But what happens is you move from one area to another. Yes. If you don't have that support structure, then obviously kids are going to attach themselves to other support structures that will be there for them outside of their home. And I think that's a simple way of looking at it. And I know it's very much more complicated than that, but it is an integral part of it.
It is very clear as we're talking that there's a need for that key support network. And Anthony, David said he was a part of a gang. I'm going to tell you what gang I was part of in shortly. But were you a part of a gang when you were young, like a group of guys, young,
Yeah.
Virgin?
Yeah, I mean, they, as David said, they were the things that, in a sense, molded me in terms of those early years. I used to be out playing cricket, football with the guys. Those memories I still remember now, in fact, in terms of those individuals who I used to hang out with, and they actually ended up shaping you because, they're the ones that, you spent a lot of your time with, you spoke to, you talked to about your school and your problems and all that sort of stuff. Yes. And in a way, it is a shame, as David said, that those sort of youth centres that normally would provide some sort of a sort of holding place, if you want, for a few hours, and due to funding cuts, just aren't there anymore. And I think that's a real tragic loss, and has probably contributed to some of the problems we've seen with these county lines and the individuals who have actually got involved.
For myself, I'm growing up from Jamaica, and you guys will laugh, but I was part of a gang, but that was my dancing group, because I was part of a dancing group. That's why you guys may have seen me doing all this dancing in the petrol station every morning and in the park, because I love dancing, and anybody who knows me know I love dancing. But I was part of a group, and it was like a gang. So we were a Phoenix group, and there are different groups, and they would, some from Kingston, sometimes some guys from states would come, and we'd have breakdance competition, like Beat Street, and we lived on those Beat Street and breaking. But that was how we bantered, and you had senior guys as well. Up to this day, there's a guy from Ocherous, which I saw again on Facebook, and I said to him, "Thank you so much for looking out after us when we were young." I remember him, kid. He used to call me Punkerton and Michael Jackson, because I had a little thing, believe it or not, I had a little thing on my hair here. I know people laugh and say, "Where's the hair?" Well, my son has got all my hair. But they actually played a fundamental part. They were there and they supported us and looked after us. So you cannot blame the young people these days for wanting that peer and that support network, but it's the influence that they have over them.
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
That's exactly it.
Sorry, Tony.
The influence they have over them, So so we just have to do the best and to keep being mentors as much as possible for young people, because if we don't mentor them, they will be mentored. Somebody's gonna mentor them.
Yeah, I think that's the way to end it. I mean, unfortunately, if you're the parent and you're not providing the support, the guidance, the mentoring, etc., then you can be sure that somebody else is, and they're not providing that input that perhaps you would want for your child.
Yes, yes. And be good to hear what other persons say as well. But David, as you're here, because we saved this one for last because we know you're gonna come in. It's up to 75% of new UK cases could be Indian variant. But it is I'm sorry, this is funny. This is so ironical. It is coming from Matt Hancock. And there's questions signed over what Matt Hancock is actually saying. Because that's what up to 75% could be Indian variant. What is that actually saying?
It's saying that there's a thought process that it's becoming the more dominant strain.
Yes.
And if that's the case, it's the case. What we know is that
it's very echoey, by the way, David. Sorry to interrupt. Very echoey.
Are you getting an echo, David? Yeah.
I am. I don't know why that is.
You okay now?
I think it's fine now.
Yes.
Is that okay with you? Yeah, perfect. So what I was saying is I think that in terms of the Indian variant, obviously it's just replacing the next strain, and this is what's going to happen repetitively over the course of time. There's going to be one more dominant strain and one more dominant strain. The main thing that we need to get to grips with is, do we have the treatments we can employ to sort of combat persons that may well be admitted to hospital? Number two, most crucially, are people being admitted to hospital in a greater extent than previous strains that we've had? Because that shows a kind of a changing ecosystem in regards to the management that may well be required in terms of vaccinations, etc. And ultimately, whilst we can concentrate on the 75% of new cases that may well be the Indian variant, it seems as though at this very early stage, at least, that the vaccine is effective against the Indian variant. So the one thing I will say is that the vaccines that we employ here are being used in India as well as other vaccines to combat the higher strain of Indian variant in India. So I would be very hopeful going forward that this treatment strategy that we have in place, which is the double vaccine, it seems to work very effectively. Again, very early stage, but seems to work very effectively against the Indian variant. So Mr. David Burton, Mr. Positivity, definitely feels that there's not very much to be sort of concerned about at this very early stage, and so it's upon us to carry on in the vaccine strategy, which has worked tremendously thus far. So I guess the politics of it is about Matt Hancock. It's very interesting. Last week, you said who's done very well, of the whole of this, and then this week the tables turns. But that is politics at the end of the day. I will stand by Rishi Sunak until something tragic happens. But I think the fact is the vaccine
to happen.
What's that?
We don't wait for tragic to happen. It's a positive.
Well, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying I will stand by the fact that I think he's made the biggest impact in regards to the way that things have been managed thus far. So, and I say that tongue in cheek. But the fact is, in terms of the vaccination platform and the profile that we have in the UK, it's doing very well. It continues to do very well. Over 18s, I think in Wales, I could be wrong. I like to be fact checked. Are now able to access the vaccinations. We getting double vaccinations are on the increase. Obviously, people who have had a single vaccinations on the increase. It's all positive, and I think we can be concerned about the Indian variant, but that concern really translates for me in terms of vaccinations. That's what it translates to.
Yes, most definitely. Well, we wish. David, I was saying to Anthony before we close off on this point here, is that today I drove to pick up a cake, but it wasn't for me, just for the record.
Okay.
Before was going away. But it reminded me of those days when that trip used to be 5 minutes, but now it was like 20, 30 minutes. But it was heartwarming. As I was saying to Anthony, I saw people in beer gardens and everything. The sun was shining, and wow, it felt good. It was a nice feeling. Feel like we're getting back to some level of normality.
I tell you one thing I saw today as I'm driving on the way back home. It was just basically kids after school walking along the street.
Yes.
And it just took my breath away, because I thought, wow, there's a group of kids walking together along a road, playing around outside, and I've not seen that for a long while. And I know we could talk about the beer gardens and everything else, but just kids being kids, not being locked away at home because of the concerns, etc. So I was happy to see that, and they were playing playfully. There was nothing to do with what we just discussed earlier.
Yes. Well, thanks for that. And I'm going to touch something briefly before we wrap up, and because we touched on it last week, but it was on the same night. subnormal standard. Is that the right, Anthony? If you can lead on that bit, this whole subnormal thing which was discussed on that program there.
That's right. Yeah, there was a
I don't
program
know if
on.
that's right.
Well,
Anthony,
it was
is
to do
frozen?
with, it was to I think the actual title was educationally subnormal for Caribbean children, and this all really came about. The documentary was highlighting the fact that back in the 60s, that a lot of Caribbean boys, in particular, were actually placed in what they termed as educationally subnormal environments in terms of the schooling that they received. And the irony is that the schools themselves were deemed as being special schools, and that's what the actual parents of these children thought they were going to. So when they had these IQ tests and they were found to be not at the same level as other children, they were told they needed to go to a special school, not realizing actually what the school was a school that had been deemed for the educationally subnormal, which was in quote unquote meant to be a sort of very limited school that didn't provide a full range of the.
I'm back. I don't know where I went, but I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think, for me, the program really highlighted a number of key things around, this IQ test that was given to the children. And, in fact, just one really crazy thing, Selborn, and I don't know, Dave, if you saw this, but one of the questions on the IQ that the child had to identify was they were shown an image of a tap. And they were told, you had to mark it as what you saw. And, a lot of the Caribbean boys didn't refer to taps as taps. They referred to them as pipes.
Pipe.
And so therefore they got it wrong. And so culturally, the test didn't take into consideration their backgrounds. And a lot of children, unfortunately, were put in schools that they didn't get the right education. They didn't learn as much as they should have done. And in fact, it really had a negative effect on them. And also that the whole thing around, behavior was also brought up. It's a fantastic documentary for those who didn't see it. And there's a book that also accompanies the film, the documentary as well, which I've also purchased and I've been reading. Yes. And I would also recommend those who are interested to get a copy of that book as well. Excellent documentary, and really credit to all those involved in it.
Is that the book by Bernard Code?
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's where I was going to lead from, and that's it's a quite a short book if I'm not mistaken. And but the thing here is when he wrote this book in the 70s, he felt, and this is reported, he felt that he was being followed and his phones were being tapped because of the kind of the information it was putting out there, which is obviously been found to be factually correct through this documentary. But he felt that he was under kind of close scrutiny because of the work they put together. And I think it's he should be commended for raising this at the time. The time that this was going on. And what was really disheartening from the story you just shared there, Anthony, is how culturally inappropriate the testing for IQ has arguably still is for certain places, because it's very easy to create not very easy to create, but you can create an IQ test, but it has to be culturally appropriate because the tap, pipe, whatever, these things cannot be used as a way of trying to get to grips as to whether somebody's got a high or a low IQ. But it's more than that. Obviously, it's the fact that the view of a person because of the context of their color of their skin, rather than the context of the character. Sorry, it was really the driving factor as to why they ended up in the positions that they did. But I think that the flip for me is that I think that we as a nation in the UK have learned from are learning from this. People are able to climb to particular positions of power despite the color of their skin, and I think that's a good thing. It's not to say that these things have not historically existed. I would never whitewash or paint over the problems that have existed, and I'm glad that this has come out now to re-educate ourselves rather than laying in a dusty textbook or dusty book that nobody really knows about. And I do hope he gets. This is Mr. Coed. I do hope he gets the the financial remuneration because of the reinvigoration of interest in this particular discussion because of his book that was put out in the 1970s.
Fantastic. Well, that was a good show, and I think that we covered some very good salient points. Anthony, any last word on that? Are you good?
Yeah, I think I would just say to as concurring what David said, that if people didn't see the documentary, please do go and watch it. If they didn't purchase the book, please do purchase the book. And it's a real gold standard in terms of somebody who back in those days was at the forefront of trying to actually make a difference and what that difference actually was all about.
Well, just to let you know, one of the ladies on the program, the one who said, "Take away the camera, I'm about to cry." Remember that lady there in the program?
Yes.
I work with her, and we had a long chat. So we're going to do an interview, a special with her.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And she's a very senior social worker now. And what our message was that while it was meant for good, it pushed them. You notice how all of them excel, the key persons?
Yeah.
They excelled even though they still had the scars, but they proved a point that you can do it. That was something. And they all have they have more degrees than all of us.
I think that's the point I touched on last week when this news first came out and the documentary was out, that one of the stories that I read was a chap going to university, and it shows how unbelievable the strain of stress, etc., that you push out of your mindset to get focused to deliver upon that one thing that you are trying to the drive and determination is unbelievable. And I obviously will wish them all well, and I hope that they can be the motivational speakers for years to come for many young folk.
Indeed. And on that note, I just want to highlight my guest for tomorrow night. And this lady here, I call it the dynamism of Nicole McIntosh, FRC, and her nursing excellence. Now, for the record, Nicole is actually a senior nurse in the UK. And if I just read briefly her bio, just to give you an idea, because it's going to be a very dynamic interview. She's currently the regional head of nursing and midwifery at Health Education England in London. She was born in Montego Bay and hailed from Westmoreland, and she's doing a fantastic stuff there, David, in that particular area. And it's so funny when I put that show out, the president of the Caribbean Nurses Association was a former, I don't know if you know Paulette Lewis. She's actually contacting me today to say, I'd like to do a show with you because we're now creating a Caribbean block supporting nurses. Because when they come from the Caribbean, sometimes they get lost in the crack as a mentor program for them. And what she said was interesting. I'll give away a couple of things. Once they take a nurse from the Caribbean, there's a policy or plan that 2 more nurses get trained, so it deals with that brain drain factor as well, and so there's some fantastic stuff which is being done. But Nicole plays a very key part. And before we go, I'll play a little outro with her for tomorrow night, which is going to be 9 o'clock, and that is very interesting. So I guess we just have to support each other. Boom.
That's the key.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, what's the plan for the week, David? Next weekend, holiday?
Relax. It's bank holiday, so have fun. And I obviously encourage people to listen to the JD UK webinar, health and webinar on diabetes. Thank you for putting it in the link there, because it's a treatable, manageable condition. I'm not saying medication doesn't play a role, but taking care of your health plays a major role and reverses some of the changes that can take place. So it prolongs your life.
Yeah, and of course, I gave you my testimony personally that I was from 52 to 42. Yeah. And the doctor was excited about it and said, keep doing what you're doing, even though it's pre-diabetic, but I'm out of the woods. But she said, I want you to just keep there still. Just keep the word diabetic there so you don't lose focus again.
you don't buy the cake and eat the cake. You need to pass the cake on.
Don't start getting the cake back. Anthony, what's the plan? Going to the movies?
Yeah, I wish. No, I mean, I'm just, obviously, I have my father to look after, so I'll be doing that. But also, just to reiterate, on the healthy side, it's funny, with diabetes, we're losing weight, all the usual stuff. As long as we look after our health in terms of our exercise and what we eat, most of the problems mentally, probably and physically, could actually be addressed. But I think we need to be consistent in actually doing that, and not just simply doing it just because we happen to be ill or we're doing it for a particular cause. If we make it part of our daily routine, I think it will actually, overall, feel a lot better as we get, as we go further in life.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to leave you with this: pay less attention to your car and pay more attention to your inner core.
Okay, David.
There you go,
Mr. Positive. Thanks for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that. Pay less attention to your car and more to your inner core. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the show. For those on Instagram, thank you. Lyndon Wizard, Mr. Inspired Diabetic was there as well. Lyndon Wizard, he was there. And also those on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you guys for coming. And I'll just close off with just a brief outro with Nicole McIntosh with my voice over. Okay. So see you guys shortly. Let me just get this one up. Boom. That one there. Here we go. Join me this Friday night, May the 28th at 9 p.m. with the late one on the Silburn City Show. Another exclusive, the dynamism of Nicole McIntosh, nurse with a purpose.
I am a senior nurse in the National Health Service in the United Kingdom. I am also a digital broadcaster. I use multimedia to share my thoughts, my views, my poetry, my blog.
It's not an easy career, and you will definitely need someone who believes in you even when you don't believe in yourself. So yes, it's important for you to have these role models and mentor who you can kind of be safe with as well. I was promoted from a D to an E grade quite quickly, and I remember knocking on my manager's door and saying, they all hate me now, look what you've done. And this was 21 years ago, and he said to me, go back out there and get on with it.
So that's 9 p.m. UK time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Tune in for an intriguing show.